When
dare
Karen
you
saw my
ignore the
truck blocking
president's
my own
directives?
driveway,
This
she didn't
neighborhood is
hesitate to
under
call the
my
police.
jurisdiction,
She stormed
and
out
you
of
will
her
follow
house,
the rules
waving her
or
phone
face
and
the
yelling about
consequences.
community rules and illegal parking. What she didn't know was that I wasn't some random neighbor ignoring the HOA. I was Colonel David Ross, a decorated military officer home after 25 years of service. I had returned to surprise my family after a long overseas mission, but instead of a warm welcome, I found myself face to face with a nosy neighbor on a power trip. When the officers arrived, she confidently demanded they tow my vehicle until they saw my credentials. Her smirk vanished, her face went pale, and the truth hit harder than any order I'd ever given. Karen had just picked a fight with the wrong man, and it was about to change everything in that neighborhood. Asterisk after months of sand, sweat, and sleepless nights overseas. I could finally see my house again, the one place that had kept me grounded through years of military service. The flight home had been long, the drive even longer, but none of that mattered now. My plan was simple: surprise my wife, Lisa, and our 2 kids. They thought I wouldn't be back for another week, which made it the perfect setup. I wanted to see their faces light up when I walked through that front door, unannounced. The street was just as I remembered, quiet, tree-lined, and neatly kept. Every lawn was freshly trimmed, mailboxes painted, and the occasional wind chime jingled in the breeze. My neighborhood had that picture-perfect suburban calm to it, but I also knew it came with something else: rules. Lots of them. Our homeowners association, led by a woman named Karen Thompson, prided itself on enforcing every little detail, from the color of mailboxes to how long your trash cans sat by the curb. I'd heard stories about her even while deployed, but I never imagined I'd be her next target. I parked my dark green truck halfway down the driveway, just close enough to unload my duffel bags and the box of souvenirs I'd brought from the base. The back seat was stuffed with small gifts: a teddy bear for my daughter, a model fighter jet for my son, and a handcrafted wooden jewelry box for Lisa. I smiled, picturing their reactions. My heart was full for the first time in months. Then I heard it, the sharp, deliberate click of high heels striking the pavement. I turned around and saw her, a woman in her mid-40s wearing oversized sunglasses, a floral blouse, and holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. She strutted toward me with the confidence of someone who thought she ran the entire neighborhood. "Excuse me?" she barked, her tone dripping with authority. "You can't park there." I blinked, confused. "Pardon?" She gestured at my truck with exaggerated irritation. "That's a violation of our neighborhood code. Driveways must remain clear for safety and aesthetic reasons." I couldn't help but laugh softly. "Ma'am, this is my driveway." She tilted her head, squinting at me from behind her sunglasses. "I don't think so," she said with a smug smile. "I know everyone who lives here. You're not one of them." For a moment, I thought she was joking. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my keys, jingling them in my hand. "I've lived here for 15 years, I said. "I've just been overseas for a while." Her smile tightened into a frown. "That's impossible. The Thompsons," she paused dramatically, "keep records of all homeowners. I've never seen you before, and frankly, you look suspicious." Suspicious. That one word stung more than I expected. I had spent decades serving this country, standing watch in dangerous places most people wouldn't dare to visit, and now, here I was, back home being accused of trespassing on my own property. "Ma'am," I said evenly, trying to stay calm, "I promise you, I live here. My wife and kids are inside." "Oh really?" she said, crossing her arms. "Then maybe they should come out and confirm that." I chuckled nervously. Well, that would ruin the surprise. That did it. Her eyes widened, and she gasped as if I had just confessed to a crime. "A surprise." She repeated dramatically, "So you admit you don't belong here." Before I could get another word out, she had her phone out, tapping the screen furiously. "I'm calling the police," she declared, loud enough for the entire block to hear. I took a deep breath, fighting the urge to argue. I'd dealt with far more dangerous people than a nosy neighbor, but something about her arrogance made my blood boil. "You really don't need to do that," I said calmly. "This is just a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" she scoffed. "You're trespassing, blocking a public view, and possibly casing the neighborhood. We have rules for a reason." I leaned against my truck and folded my arms. "If it makes you feel better, go ahead," I said. "I'll wait right here." That only seemed to make her angrier. She turned her back on me, pacing in small circles as she talked to the 911 operator. I caught bits of her exaggerated story. Large man, unfamiliar vehicle, potential threat. It would have been funny if it wasn't happening to me. 10 minutes later, 2 police cruisers rolled into the cul-de-sac, lights flashing, but no sirens. A few curious neighbors peeked from their windows. Karen stood in the middle of my driveway, waving her hands like she was directing traffic. "Over here, officers. That's him," she shouted, pointing straight at me. I stayed still, hands visible, posture calm. The officers stepped out, cautious but professional. "Sir, can we see some identification?" one asked. "Of course," I replied, reaching slowly into my jacket pocket. I handed them both my driver's license and my military ID card. They studied the IDs for a moment, then looked up at me. Recognition dawned on their faces. "Colonel David Ross," one of them said, straightening his posture immediately. "Sir, welcome home." Karen's expression faltered. What? Colonel? She said, her voice trembling slightly. The officer turned to her. Ma'am, this man isn't trespassing. He lives here. He's a decorated officer returning home from service. Karen's mouth opened and closed like she wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. The air grew still. I gave her a polite smile. Next time, Karen, maybe knock before calling 911. She didn't respond. She just turned around, red-faced, and stormed back to her house. I watched her go, shaking my head in disbelief. So much for a peaceful homecoming. My first day back had turned into a standoff in my own driveway, but something told me this was only the beginning. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of birds chirping and the smell of coffee drifting through the house. Lisa was in the kitchen, humming softly as she cooked breakfast, while our kids were still asleep upstairs. For the first time in months, I felt the comfort of home again. But the peace didn't last long. My phone started buzzing on the counter, an unknown number flashing on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. Good morning. This is Officer Daniels from the county precinct. A calm voice said. Colonel Ross. We just wanted to follow up regarding yesterday's incident. I sighed, rubbing my forehead. Good morning, officer. I assume this has something to do with my neighbor? Yes, sir, he replied, sounding a bit uneasy. We received another call last night from the same individual, a Mrs. Karen Thompson. She claimed you were intimidating her. I let out a humorless laugh. Intimidating? I didn't even speak to her after she called 911 on me. I figured that, sir, he said quickly. We just wanted to confirm there's no ongoing dispute. You're clear on our end. We've marked her complaint as unfounded. Appreciate it, I said, my tone steady. I've dealt with more serious situations than this, but I'd rather not have my name on another police report because of an overzealous neighbor. When I hung up, Lisa was standing at the doorway with crossed arms and a knowing look. Karen again, she asked. I nodded. Apparently, I scare her. Lisa shook her head. She's the kind of person who sees a shadow and calls the fire department. Don't waste your time worrying about her. I smiled faintly. I'm trying not to, but people like her thrive on attention. I have a feeling this isn't over. Later that afternoon, as I was fixing the mailbox post that had loosened over the years, I heard that same sharp voice again. Colonel Ross, she said with fake politeness, her arms folded tightly across her chest. I think we need to have a talk. I turned slowly, suppressing my irritation. Good afternoon, Karen. What can I do for you? She stepped closer, eyes narrowing behind her sunglasses. You embarrassed me in front of the police yesterday. I raised an eyebrow. You embarrassed yourself, ma'am. I didn't ask you to call them. That's not the point, she snapped. I was only trying to protect the neighborhood. You could have been anyone. How was I supposed to know you actually lived here? By asking? I said simply. Her lips thinned. Well, we have community standards, and as head of the HOA safety committee, it's my responsibility to make sure residents follow them. Karen, I said, standing up straight, I've served this country for 25 years. I understand what rules are, but respect works both ways. You could have avoided this entire mess with a simple conversation. She crossed her arms tighter. Perhaps, but you parked your truck across your driveway again today. I looked back at the truck. I'm unloading some tools. I'll move it once I'm done. She let out a dramatic sigh. The rules are clear. Driveways must remain unobstructed. I've already informed the HOA board that we'll be discussing this. I almost laughed. Discussing what? My right to park in my own driveway. You'd be surprised, she said coldly, then turned and walked away. I watched her march down the street like a self-appointed patrol officer. My patience was wearing thin, but I decided not to engage further. After all, my priority was settling back into family life, not getting dragged into neighborhood drama. That evening, my kids helped me unpack my duffel bags, and we spent hours laughing over the trinkets I'd brought home. But just as things were feeling normal, Lisa opened the front door and frowned. David, she said, you need to see this. Taped to the door was a yellow slip of paper, stamped with the HOA seal. At the top, it read, Notice of Community Violation. I took the paper and scanned it. Unauthorized vehicle obstruction. Property owner is required to comply with parking code section. For B, immediate correction is mandatory. Lisa crossed her arms. She's really doing this. Apparently so, I said, crumpling the paper slightly. She's not just being nosy now. She's trying to make it official. The next day, I decided to pay a visit to the HOA office. It wasn't far, just a small administrative building at the edge of the neighborhood. Inside, a volunteer receptionist greeted me with a nervous smile. Can I help you, sir? Yes, I said, setting the notice on the counter. I received this yesterday. I'd like to know who issued it. She glanced at the paper, then quickly looked away. That would be Mrs. Thompson. Of course, I muttered. And does she have the authority to issue official violations? Well, the receptionist said hesitantly, she's on the safety committee, but she doesn't have direct enforcement power. She can make recommendations, but actual citations need board approval. So, this notice isn't valid. Technically, no. I smiled politely. Thank you. That's all I needed to know. When I walked out, the late afternoon sun glared off the hood of my truck. Karen's car was parked across the street, and I could see her peeking through the window blinds, pretending to check her mailbox. I gave her a calm nod and climbed into my truck. As I drove home, I realized something. This wasn't about parking or safety. This was about control. Karen wasn't protecting the community. She was protecting her ego. That night, I sat on the porch with Lisa, watching the stars above the quiet street. You know, she said softly, you've dealt with people like her before, just in different uniforms. I chuckled. You're not wrong. But this time, I'm not playing her game. If she wants a battle, she'll get one, but on my terms. Lisa smiled knowingly. Just remember, you don't need a rank to win this one. I leaned back in my chair, eyes fixed on the horizon. Karen thought she had power because of her clipboard and her title, but she had no idea who she was dealing with. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. A few quiet days passed after the false violation notice, and for a moment, I allowed myself to believe Karen had finally decided to back off. I mowed the lawn, repaired the old fence by the garden, and even managed to host a small barbecue for a few of the friendlier neighbors. It felt good to be home again, to laugh with familiar faces, and hear normal conversations that didn't involve military codes or operations. But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't done. People like her never walked away quietly. Sure enough, the calm didn't last long. One evening, as I was putting away the grill, I noticed a white envelope taped to my mailbox. My name was printed neatly across the front in bold letters. I tore it open and unfolded the letter inside. Dear Mr. Ross, it began, you are hereby invited to attend the upcoming HOA meeting to discuss multiple reports regarding your recent conduct and compliance with neighborhood guidelines. At the bottom, Karen Thompson's name was signed in large, looping letters, followed by head of HOA Safety Committee. Lisa peeked over my shoulder, reading the letter with me. You've got to be kidding, she muttered. She's dragging you in front of the board now. I folded the paper and slipped it into my back pocket. Looks that way, I said. Maybe it's time I meet the people she's been rallying. Lisa frowned. Don't go in there angry, David. That's exactly what she wants, to make you lose your cool. I smiled slightly. Don't worry. I faced tougher interrogations than a homeowner's meeting. When the night of the meeting arrived, I decided to make an impression. I put on my dress uniform, polished boots, neatly pressed jacket, and the medals I had earned through decades of service. I wasn't trying to intimidate anyone, but I wanted to remind them who I was, not some troublemaker, but a man who had dedicated his life to discipline, duty, and honor. The community hall was buzzing when I walked in. Neighbors filled every seat, whispering to each other as I entered. Karen sat at the front of the room beside a long table, a smug expression plastered across her face. The moment she saw me in uniform, her smile faltered just a little. Well, good evening, everyone, she said loudly, tapping her gavel against the table. Let's bring this meeting to order. We have several topics to discuss tonight, but first, we'll address the issue of Mr. Ross and his non-compliance with community standards. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. I remained standing, hands clasped behind my back, calm and composed. Karen cleared her throat dramatically. Over the past week, multiple residents have expressed concern over Mr. Ross's vehicle, obstructing visibility near his driveway, and his, shall we say, confrontational behavior toward community members. I tilted my head slightly. Would you like me to respond to that, ma'am? Her eyes narrowed. By all means. I stepped forward, my voice steady and even. First off, my vehicle was parked in my driveway, not on the street or anyone else's property. Secondly, the only confrontation that occurred was when I was accused of trespassing on my own land. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't threaten anyone, and the police verified my ownership. I believe they can confirm that. A few people nodded quietly. I caught sight of Officer Daniels himself sitting in the back, off-duty but clearly curious. He gave me a respectful nod. Karen forced a tight smile. Be that as it may, Colonel, our neighborhood operates on a strict set of rules. Everyone is expected to follow them equally, regardless of occupation. Of course, I said, but equality works both ways. You can't enforce rules selectively or issue fake violations. Her face reddened slightly. I was simply doing my duty to maintain order. I met her gaze firmly. No, Karen, you were trying to maintain control. There's a difference. A quiet hush fell over the room. Even the board members looked uncomfortable. One of them, an older gentleman named Frank, cleared his throat. Actually, Karen, we did review the citation notice. It wasn't properly filed or approved. Technically, it doesn't count as a valid infraction. Karen blinked rapidly, caught off guard. I was under the impression you overstepped, Frank said gently but firmly. Again, there was a soft murmur of agreement from the crowd. I didn't gloat, but I could feel the tension finally beginning to break. I took a breath and continued. Look, I understand the need for order. I respect rules. They're what keep communities functioning. But enforcing them with hostility or without facts doesn't protect anyone. It divides people. The room grew silent. Karen looked as if she wanted to speak, but every word seemed to die on her lips. Another board member, a middle-aged woman named Denise, spoke up next. Colonel Ross, we appreciate your service and your patience in addressing this respectfully. On behalf of the board, we'll be nullifying the violation and reviewing how complaints are handled moving forward. I nodded. That's all I ask. As the meeting adjourned, several neighbors came up to shake my hand or thank me for clearing things up. Even those who didn't know me well seemed to understand that the situation had gone too far. Karen stayed seated as the room emptied, staring at her notes with a tight jaw. When I walked past her, I paused. "For what it's worth," I said quietly, "I don't hold grudges, but maybe next time, you'll start with a conversation instead of a call." She didn't reply. She just kept her eyes down, her authority slipping through her fingers. When I stepped outside, the cool night air hit me like a wave of relief. Lisa was waiting in the truck, smiling proudly. She asked. I smiled back. "Let's just say the HOA's got new rules, starting with respecting your neighbors." As we drove home under the streetlights, I couldn't help but think that this small battle, unlike the ones I'd fought overseas, had taught me something bigger about peace. Sometimes, it's not about winning. It's about reminding people that respect is the foundation of every community, no matter where you serve. For a few days after the HOA meeting, the neighborhood returned to an almost eerie calm. The usual gossip that floated through the cul-de-sac seemed to quiet down. Neighbors waved as I walked my dog, kids played in the street again, and even the air felt lighter. I thought maybe, just maybe, the entire fiasco was behind me. But with someone like Karen Thompson, peace was only ever temporary. I should have known she wouldn't take public humiliation lying down. Losing her authority in front of the board had bruised her ego, and bruised egos tend to fight back. It started subtly. One morning I found a small, crumpled note tucked under my windshield wiper. It read, in shaky cursive, "You might have fooled the HOA, but I see the truth. People like you always slip up." No name, but I didn't need one. Karen's brand of pettiness had a distinct tone. Lisa found it later that day, and frowned. "She's still going, huh?" I shrugged. "Let her write all the notes she wants. I've dealt with worse threats from better people." But soon, the whispers started. Neighbors who used to greet me warmly now hesitated before waving. I caught snippets of conversation as I walked by, words like military temper, power trip, and anger issues. It didn't take long to figure out where the rumors were coming from. Karen had found her new weapon, gossiped out one afternoon. As I was trimming the hedges, my next-door neighbor, Mr. Fletcher, approached me hesitantly. "Colonel Ross," he said, clearing his throat, "I don't mean to pry, but did something happen between you and Mrs. Thompson?" I sighed. "She called the police on me for parking in my own driveway, then tried to get me cited by the HOA. He scratched his neck awkwardly. "Well, she's been telling folks you threatened her after the meeting. Said she's afraid to walk past your house now." I nearly laughed, but the absurdity made me more frustrated than amused. "Threatened her?" I didn't even raise my voice. "I figured as much," he said quickly. "Just thought you should know what's going around." By evening, Lisa and I sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the trees. "She's trying to ruin your reputation," Lisa said quietly. "Yeah," I admitted, taking a slow sip of coffee. "And she's doing it the coward's way." "Well," she said with a wry smile, "you've fought tougher wars. Just make sure this one doesn't get under your skin." I nodded, though I couldn't help but feel the simmering anger building inside. The breaking point came 2 mornings later. I was heading out to grab the newspaper when I noticed something odd. Bright orange paint splattered across the side of my truck. Someone had scrawled the word menace across the door in large, dripping letters. My stomach dropped. The paint was still wet. I immediately checked the doorbell camera footage, and sure enough, at around 2 a.m., a figure could be seen sneaking up the driveway. The quality wasn't perfect, but the outline of the body, the bob of the blonde hair, and the distinct floral robe were unmistakable. Lisa gasped when she saw it. "Tell me that's not it's her," I finished, my jaw tightening. "Karen, I didn't want to involve the police again, but this crossed a line. Defamation was one thing, vandalism was another." I called Officer Daniels, who had handled the first incident. He arrived within 20 minutes, clipboard in hand, expression serious. He examined the paint job, shook his head, and then I showed him the footage. He exhaled slowly. "That's pretty solid evidence, Colonel. We can take this seriously. You want to press charges?" For a moment, I hesitated. Military discipline had taught me restraint, not revenge. But this wasn't about pride. It was about standing up for myself and my family. "Yes," I said firmly, "I do." Daniels nodded. "We'll file it as vandalism and harassment. Given her history with you, this won't look good on her record." Word spread fast again, only this time, the story was different. Karen wasn't the neighborhood hero anymore. She was the woman who vandalized a veteran's truck out of spite. The board called an emergency session the next day, and I was asked to attend. When I walked into the hall, Karen was already there, her arms folded defensively, her expression pale and shaky. The board chair, Denise, looked exhausted. "Karen," she began, "we've reviewed the footage. There's no question about what happened," Karen stammered. "It was a misunderstanding. I was just walking my dog without a leash." At 2 a.m., with a can of spray paint, Denise interrupted. "Please, don't insult us." Karen's jaw worked, but no sound came out. The board voted unanimously to remove her from all committee positions and suspend her HOA privileges indefinitely. When the decision was announced, Karen shot me a glare filled with fury and humiliation. "This isn't over," she hissed as I passed her in the hallway. I met her eyes steadily. "For your sake, Karen, I hope it is." That evening, the neighborhood felt lighter again. Neighbors who had avoided me now came forward with support. Some even brought over food or stopped to chat longer than usual. It felt like the balance had been restored. But as I sat on the porch later that night, watching the soft glow of the streetlights, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that Karen's words weren't just idle talk. People like her didn't know how to back down. Lisa came out and sat beside me, resting her head on my shoulder. "It's over," she whispered. "Maybe," I said quietly, staring out into the shadows. But with her, there's always a next move. And somewhere down the street, I could almost swear I saw a curtain flicker, a silhouette standing just behind it, watching. When the day of the court hearing arrived, the air in the small-town courthouse was thick with tension. Karen sat near the front, dressed in her usual overly formal attire, tapping her pen on the table like she owned the place. Her lawyer looked bored, probably expecting another simple neighbor dispute case. I walked in calmly, wearing my dark blue military uniform, medals neatly aligned, shoes shining so bright they caught the light. The chatter in the courtroom stopped immediately. Every eye turned toward me, including Karen's. The smug grin she'd worn for weeks melted right off her face. The judge raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "Mr. Daniels, I assume you're here regarding the case of obstruction and harassment," he asked. I nodded respectfully and handed him a sealed folder. "Yes, Your Honor, but there's more to this situation than a blocked driveway." Karen's lawyer chuckled under his breath, but that laughter faded as the judge opened the folder. Inside were classified clearance documents, proof of my position as a high-ranking officer working directly with state and federal agencies. My vehicle wasn't just any SUV, it was part of a secure fleet authorized for federal operations. "This is extraordinary," the judge said. "Mrs. Watkins, did you call the police on a federal officer conducting official business on his own property?" Karen's mouth fell open. What? He was blocking the street. He was breaking the law, she stammered. I turned toward her, calm but firm. "You've harassed me, filmed my family, and lied to the police. You didn't just file a complaint, you interfered with a federal operation. And for that, there will be consequences." The courtroom murmured. Karen's face went pale as her lawyer frantically whispered to her. The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Watkins, based on the evidence and sworn testimony, I'm dismissing your complaint and recommending an investigation into your false police reports and harassment." Karen stood up, shaking. "You can't do this. I'm the HOA president. I make the rules," she shouted, but the judge slammed his gavel down. "Not in this courtroom. You don't." As she was escorted out, she shot me a look full of hatred and disbelief. For someone who thought she ruled the neighborhood, it must have been humiliating to realize her authority meant nothing here. I didn't smile. I just saluted the judge respectfully and left the courtroom, letting the truth speak louder than any words ever could. Outside, a few of the neighbors who had shown up for the hearing approached me hesitantly. "We had no idea who you really were," one man said, looking embarrassed. "Karen made it sound like you were some kind of troublemaker." I nodded politely. That's how Schopenhauer's power, through fear. But fear only works until someone stands up to it. Over the next few weeks, everything changed. The HOA board held an emergency meeting and voted Karen out of her position. Her constant reports, fines, and surveillance had finally caught up with her. People realized she wasn't protecting the community, she was controlling it. I never once celebrated her downfall, though. Instead, I focused on restoring peace to the neighborhood. I rebuilt my driveway gate, not to keep people out, but to remind myself of the boundary between personal pride and unnecessary conflict. My neighbors started greeting me warmly again, dropping by with small apologies disguised as kind gestures, fresh pies, a handshake, a simple thanks for your service. I accepted each one quietly. One afternoon, as I stood outside washing my car, I saw a moving truck in front of Karen's house. She was leaving. No yelling, no drama, just silence. She avoided my gaze as she got into her car, her face drained of that usual arrogance. For the first time, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost, when she drove away. The neighborhood seemed lighter, as if the tension had lifted with her. Kids played in the streets again, neighbors talked over fences, and the air felt free. The same officer who had once been called to my house came by on patrol. He gave me a friendly wave and said, "Heard she's moving out for good. Guess justice served itself, huh?" I smiled. Sometimes justice doesn't need to be loud, it just needs to be seen. That night, I stood by my window, looking at the calm street. My SUV sat neatly in my driveway, reflecting the glow of the porch light. The same driveway that started all this chaos. Funny how something so simple could reveal so much about people, about pride, power, and truth. I turned off the lights and sat down at my desk, opening a small notebook where I kept personal reflections from my service years. On a blank page, I wrote one line: "Real authority doesn't need to be announced, it's shown through how you stand when others try to knock you down." Then I closed the book and smiled. For the first time in a long while, the neighborhood was quiet, not out of fear, but out of peace. For more true-to-life, HOA revenge and justice stories, make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, HOA Bright Reality. New episodes every week where reality shines brighter than fiction.